The desert blazed mercilessly across the New Mexico landscape, each scorching ray hammering down on Clara McKee like divine punishment. Every gulp of air burned her lungs with gritty heat. Above, the sky stretched endlessly white, a blinding canvas that forced tears from her squinting eyes. Still, she pressed on. The water pail bounced against her side, nearly drained from her journey to the distant, struggling creek. In this harsh land, water wasn't a blessing, it was salvation. You fought for with every step. She was making her way back when something caught her eye. Initially, it appeared to be another casualty of the desert, perhaps a wild animal that scavengers had abandoned. Then she noticed the faint movement, chest rising, falling, desperate and uneven. Her pace faltered. Her pulse hammered against her ribs. This was barely more than a boy. His skin gleamed like burnished metal in the harsh light. Matted dark hair stuck to his skull, crusted with dried blood and sand. A broken arrow protruded from his upper leg, its shaft snapped close to the wound. His clothing hung in tatters, exposing flesh and sinew beneath. Parched lips, sealed eyes, and crimson pooling in the earth around. Him told the story of a man dancing with death. Her father's warning surfaced from buried memories. Find one of their kind isolated. Daughter, he's drawing you into a trap. The others lurk close by. Yet her legs wouldn't carry her away. Slowly she knelt, gripping the bucket while pressing trembling fingers to his throat. A heartbeat pulsed there, threadbare but persistent. When she shifted his head, he released a soft moan, vulnerable and mortal, not menacing. Just clinging to life, she tipped the bucket, allowing precious drops to touch his cracked lips. He startled, then managed to swallow. His eyelids fluttered. Words tumbled from his mouth, neither English nor Spanish. Perhaps Comanche dialect. Maybe desperate prayers or dying curses. That's when the thunder of approaching horses shattered the silence. 6 mounted figures charged toward her, faces masked by dusty bandanas, weapons hanging ready. Dirt and perspiration coated their gear. Tucker led the charge, a man whose voice scraped like rusted metal, whose temper struck like a coiled serpent. "Well, Miss McKee?" Tucker drawled, reining in his mount. His gaze dropped to the wounded man. Now this is quite the discovery. Clara rose gradually, every muscle taut. "He's dying." "He's Comanche," Tucker shot back. "Murdered 2 good men near Dry Creek. Shot them from behind like a coward. Ran when his war party scattered." She remained motionless. One rider chuckled darkly. "Let the woman tend to him. He'll slit her throat before evening falls." Tucker leaned forward in his saddle, face hardening. "You aid him, Clara, and you're no better than them. Might as well daub war paint on your cheeks and brandish a hatchet." Clara's jaw clenched. "He's bleeding out. Then let nature take its course." Tucker adjusted his rifle's position. "Unless you'd prefer we finish the job ourselves." She met his stare unflinchingly. "Raise that weapon on my property again, Tucker, and I swear before God you'll be buried right beside him." The silence stretched taut as a wire about to snap. A younger rider muttered, "This isn't our fight." Tucker spat contemptuously into the dust. Always did have a weakness for hopeless causes. He wheeled his horse around sharply and thundered off. His men following suit, Clara waited until their dust cloud disappeared. Only then did she drop beside the wounded man again. "You'd better be worth the trouble," she murmured, unwinding the scarf from her neck to bind his leg. Her hands shook. Her breathing came in quick bursts, but she worked with the determination of someone who had run out of alternatives. The arrow had to remain for now. She'd learned that lesson when her husband returned with one piercing his shoulder. He'd survived the wound only to succumb to infection later. "Damn you," she whispered, hoisting him over her shoulder. "You weigh more than you appear." Each step homeward was agony. Her spine screamed in protest. Her arms quivered. Her knees buckled repeatedly. But she continued, one agonizing step after another, until her weathered cabin came into view, a humble, sun-bleached refuge that had outlasted her marriage and her hopes. Inside, she kicked aside a worn rug and lifted the cellar door. Cool air rose to greet her like a gentle exhale. "I'll live to regret this decision," she muttered, lowering him into the darkness. But that reckoning isn't today. She tossed down bedding, healing salve, and a water container before sealing the entrance. Only after securing the trapdoor did her strength abandon her. She collapsed against the wall, lungs burning. Fingers scraped raw from blood and wooden splinters. Outside, wind scattered dust across her yard. Inside, Clara McKee stared at the bolted door, rifle resting across her knees, and whispered into the emptiness, "Stay alive, Comanche. I've wagered everything on a stranger I can't even understand." The cellar embraced him in darkness and coolness, thick with the scent of earth and stored vegetables, the kind of smell that clung to roots and hidden things. Clara descended with a flickering oil lamp, setting it beside the makeshift bed she'd prepared. The Comanche warrior lay still except for his labored breathing. Sweat glistened on his skin, streaked with grime and dried blood. The arrow remained embedded in his thigh. Surrounded by inflamed flesh, Clara knelt beside him, her hands betraying her nervousness despite her efforts. She'd boiled water, gathered clean cloth, brought whiskey for sterilization, and located thread unused since her last futile attempt at mending something beyond repair. He showed no response as she cut fabric away from the wound. Only when alcohol hit the torn flesh did he groan a sound caught between agony and warning. His eyes opened briefly, unfocused and dark, and she glimpsed the wildness there. The raw edge of someone who'd spent too long being hunted. "You're safe now," she said softly. Uncertain whether she was reassuring him or herself, he gave no response, didn't even blink. She set her jaw and returned to her work. Removing the arrow would cause excessive bleeding, so she cleansed around it, packed the wound, and wrapped it as tightly as she dared. Her movements were awkward but careful, guided more by instinct than expertise. When finished, she wiped sweat from her forehead and sat back, breathing heavily. "Going to speak?" she asked, expecting nothing. "Or just study me like I'm the guilty party here?" His stare remained unchanged, cautious, watchful. "No need for gratitude," she muttered. "Just don't try to harm me when you can stand again." That night, she slept beside the trapdoor, rifle within arm's reach. She told herself it was simple precaution. She told herself she didn't trust him, which remained largely true. But when she woke near midnight, the cellar was quiet except for whispered words. A single phrase repeated in a voice dry and fragmented as ancient parchment. "No, comi ... The voice came again, soft and low. She didn't understand the meaning, not English. Not Spanish, but something about his tone, about the way he spoke it, made her heartbeat slow. Perhaps a prayer, maybe a name, possibly a memory. She lay back down and stared at the ceiling, eyes wide until sleep finally claimed her. By dawn, his fever had broken. She descended with a tin cup of broth to find him conscious, eyes clearer, tracking her movements. He didn't attempt to rise or speak, but when she offered the cup, their fingers touched briefly. For the first time, he met her gaze without suspicion. He drank slowly. Upon finishing, he returned the cup with both hands, deliberate, careful, respectful. Then he looked at her again, and though words didn't come, his expression conveyed something unmistakable. Gratitude. She set the cup aside and crossed her arms. "You're welcome," she said. He nodded once, slowly. They sat in silence, two strangers bound by injury and dust, neither knowing what lay ahead, but both breathing for now. Dawn arrived pale and sharp, slicing through dusty air like a blade. Clara was stoking the stove fire when the first sound reached her hoofbeats, not one or two, but many. Soft, purposeful, not the frantic galloping of Tucker's posse. This was ceremonial, ominous. She moved to the window and peered out. They emerged like shadows materializing from the earth itself. More than a dozen Comanche warriors approached on horseback, silent as drifting wind, spreading in a wide circle around her cabin. Feathers adorned their hair, rifles hung ready, tomahawks gleamed at their sides. They made no war cries, drew no weapons, but their presence pressed against the world like a storm preparing to unleash its fury. Leading them rode an older warrior, spine straight as an arrow, face carved by sun and conflict. His braids showed silver streaks. His chest bore faded paint and scars like history etched in flesh. His eyes were keen, deeply set, completely unreadable. This man wasn't merely a leader, he was judgment incarnate. Clara's pulse thundered in her ears. She grabbed the rifle from beside the door and stepped outside slowly, boots crunching on parched ground. Her dress fluttered in the breeze and her mouth felt desert dry. She kept the weapon lowered but accessible. The circle of warriors neither moved nor spoke. She lifted her chin. "You've come for him." The leader dismounted with fluid grace, a man who'd never needed to flee from anything. He took 2 measured steps forward, hands empty but his stare cutting like steel. "We came for our brother," he said, voice low and rich with warning. Clara held her ground. "You're too late if you came to bury him." His eyes narrowed. "I discovered him bleeding in the dirt," she continued, keeping her voice steady. "Arrow in his leg, half dead from exposure." "Your people abandoned him?" Murmurs stirred among the warriors. The leader said nothing, studying her the way a hawk examines prey, calculating whether to strike. "I brought him here," Clara said. "Cleaned his wounds, fed him broth. He's breathing because I didn't heed the men who wanted him dead." Silence persisted. Then from beneath the house came a muffled sound, a low groan, unmistakable. Every warrior's eyes shifted toward the floorboards behind her. Clara didn't flinch. "He's alive, but not ready to travel." The leader stepped closer. "You keep him like a captive." "I kept him like a human being, one who would have perished without me." His gaze flicked to her hands, to the rifle's stock now visible behind her hip. "I didn't bring him here to bargain," she added. "And I didn't bring him here to possess." Another murmur passed through the warriors, low, uncertain. The leader looked past her toward the roof, the chimney, the smoke still drifting thin and steady. His fingers flexed at his side, then he turned to speak in his native tongue. The men responded with slow, curt nods. Clara couldn't understand the words, but she recognized their meaning: judgment, debate, suspicion. She watched as he stepped back, then raised his chin. "You claim you saved him," he said finally. "Then you watch over him until he speaks. Until he chooses." Her breath caught. She nodded once. He turned, remounted, and signaled his men, but they didn't ride away. Instead, they dismounted, forming a perimeter. Not hostile, not friendly, waiting. They wouldn't leave without their brother. And Clara, for the first time, realized she wasn't sheltering one man anymore. She was standing in the center of something far larger than her own fears. The Comanche didn't depart. They made no campfires, spoke little, but they remained silent silhouettes surrounding the cabin like spirits awaiting something lost to return. Each night, Clara secured the doors, though not from fear anymore. Fear had begun yielding to something more complex: uncertainty. On the second morning, the leader returned to her doorstep. Clara emerged, rifle at her side, chin raised high. Her heart pounded, but her voice remained firm. "He's not ready to leave." His expression didn't change. "He is our blood. We care for our own. You left him to die. He chose to fight. He accepted the consequences." Clara swallowed. "Perhaps so, but I didn't let him die. And I won't let you take him just to finish what the desert started." His gaze sharpened. "You think we kill our wounded?" "I don't know what you'll do," she said. "That's exactly the point." Silence stretched between them, a test of wills. She could see conflict flicker in his eyes. Honor, suspicion, pride. Finally, he gave a sharp nod. "One more day. Then we speak again." He turned and walked away, boots stirring dust. Clara released a breath only when he vanished behind the trees. That evening, she brought fresh bandages and warm water to the cellar. The warrior was awake, propped slightly on one elbow, skin pale but no longer fevered. When she knelt beside him, he didn't flinch. She dipped the cloth and began unwrapping his thigh. The wound looked angry but cleaner, healing gradually. "You've got a stubborn will," she muttered, wiping gently. His voice came low and rough. "So do you." She blinked at him. "English now?" He nodded once. "Some. Good, I'm tired of talking to myself." He managed the faintest smile at the corner of his mouth. Then his gaze shifted, searching her face. "Why?" he asked as she paused. "Why what? Why save me?" Clara sat back on her heels, letting the question settle between them. After a moment, she said, "You weren't a threat then, and you were dying." That was enough. He studied her. "That simple?" "No," she ran a hand through her hair, "but it's the best answer I have." Silence again. Because something in his eyes made her feel safe to say it, she added, "My husband was killed 5 years ago." "Not by Comanche, I believe." No one really knew. It was a cattle dispute, one of those fights where no one's wrong but everyone bleeds. He looked at her gently. "You think I am him?" She shook her head. "I don't think anything anymore. I used to believe the world was simpler, good men and bad, us and them. Now I think we're all guessing until it's too late." He was quiet for a long time. Then he said softly but clearly, "I am not the man who killed your husband." "I know." She didn't realize she meant it until the words left her mouth. Their eyes held not as enemies. Not even as strangers, but as two people trying to communicate through the cracks in their worlds. Later that night, as she sat at the top of the stairs with the trapdoor slightly open to listen, she heard his voice again. "No, Comey," he whispered into the darkness. And this time she whispered back, "Peace." Dust rose, first a long finger stretching against the hard blue sky, curling like smoke across the ridge. Clara spotted it just before noon while gathering kindling near her property's edge. She squinted into the distance, heart constricting as shapes began taking form: horses, saddles, rifles. Tucker's men? They had returned. She dropped the wood and sprinted toward the cabin, skirts tangling around her knees, boots pounding dry earth. Inside, she slammed the door shut and grabbed the rifle from the wall, breath already coming fast. Then she stepped outside, hands steady but stomach churning. The riders thundered into her yard like an uninvited tempest. 7 of them, Tucker leading. His ruddy face gleamed with sweat and fury. The others flanking him with weapons ready, eyes bright with the thrill of impending violence. "Well, I'll be damned," Tucker called out, pulling his horse to a halt. "Look at this little frontier queen standing tall like she owns the territory." Clara remained silent. He tilted his head, grinning. "He's still hiding in there, your war prize?" She gritted her teeth. "Tell me, Clara," he sneered. "You become his woman yet, or just keeping him warm till they come cut your throat in your sleep?" The men laughed ugly and cruel. Clara didn't move. "Turn around, Tucker. You have no business here." Tucker's smile vanished. "We've got every right. That may be Comanche land out there, but this is ours. We're not about to let one of theirs play dead here while the rest crawl out of the brush." He kicked his horse forward several paces. "I heard rumors you're sheltering one, that he's not just breathing but talking." Clara stepped forward, placing herself squarely in the yard center. "Leave," she said. "Now I won't ask again." One of the men raised his rifle. "She's bluffing." The answer came from the trees behind the cabin, beside the barn, among the brush. Silent movement, purposeful. The leader's warriors had not left. They emerged from the wood's edge like wraiths' rifles, raised but not aimed. Watching, surrounding, waiting. Tucker stiffened. "Well, look at that." They didn't run. "Brave little beasts, aren't they?" Tension in the air drew tight as wire. Clara's voice cut through it. "I will not let blood spill on my land unless given no other choice." Tucker turned his glare on her. "You really picked your side, didn't you?" "I didn't pick a side," she snapped. "I chose to save a life. You came here to kill." He laughed once, bitter. "You sound just like my wife before she ran off with a preacher." The leader stepped out from behind the cabin, walking slowly but fearlessly. His warriors spread wider. No one spoke. They didn't need to. Tucker's hand dropped to his holster. Clara's rifle rose before he could draw. Her voice cracked like a whip. "Try it, I dare you." Tucker stared at her. Wind picked up. A loose shutter slapped against the cabin wall like a heartbeat. "You aiming that at me, Clara?" He said, quieter now. "I'm aiming it at the man who decides to make me dig another grave in this hard ground." They stood like that for one long, painful moment. Behind her, the wounded warrior appeared in the doorway, pimping but upright. He said nothing, but his presence sent a shiver through Tucker's ranks. "Not a ghost? Not a corpse?" A man who refused to die, Docker spat into the dust. This ain't over. No, Clara said. But maybe it never should have started. He turned his horse, snarling. One day, girl, you'll wish you'd let him bleed. The posse rode off in a storm of hooves and dust. When the air cleared, Clara lowered her rifle slowly. The leader stepped beside her, eyes unreadable. You fight for him? He said. She turned to look at the warrior, who stood behind her, steadying himself on the doorframe. I fight for peace, she said. But if I have to stand between both sides with a gun to keep it, so be it. The leader gave a slight nod. Not approval, not praise, recognition. Clara had become something else now. Not just a settler, not just a woman. She was a boundary, a line no one crossed lightly. It began with a sound like breaking bone, sharp, sudden, final. A gunshot cracked through the stillness, echoing off rocks like thunder. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The world held its breath, then chaos tore it wide open. Smoke burst from a settler's rifle muzzle, and the bullet struck earth inches from the leader's feet. The warriors responded instantly, moving like wind and fire, spreading through brush with terrifying coordination. Rifles barked, horses reared, air filled with shouting, gunfire, and the scream of dust-choked wind. Clara didn't have time to think. She dropped behind the woodpile beside the cabin, loaded her rifle with shaking hands, and pressed it against her shoulder. Gunfire around her was deafening, but she could still hear voices, men shouting her name, calling her traitor, demanding surrender. None of it mattered anymore. She caught sight of the warrior near the doorway, gripping the wall for balance. Still weak, favoring his wounded leg, but his eyes were sharp and alert. Battle had brought him back to life. Clara raised her head and fired. A settler ducked too late. His hat flew off as her shot tore through the brim. She ducked back as return fire split the air above her, biting wood and sending splinters into her face. She wiped her cheek with the back of her hand, smearing dust and blood. To her left, the leader directed a flanking charge, guiding warriors with hand signals, voice low and urgent. The Comanche moved as one, flashing between cover, rifles raised, fearless. Clara didn't speak their language, but she didn't need to. Their battle was a language unto itself. Then a sudden cry rang out sharp, close. Clara turned just in time to see a settler break from the trees, rifle leveled at the warrior's exposed side. She scrambled to her feet, heart hammering, and fired without aiming. The shot slammed into the man's shoulder. He spun, dropping his weapon as he fell hard to the ground. Clara stood frozen, smoke curling from her rifle barrel. Her breath came in ragged gasps. Her hands trembled. The warrior stared at her, not in fear, not in anger, but in something deeper, recognition. She had drawn blood in his defense. There was no going back now. Another shot rang out, this one closer. Clara ducked, pain lancing across her upper arm. A graze, not deep, but enough to knock her sideways into the dust. Before she could rise, a shadow moved fast beside her. The warrior. He crawled toward her, dragging his injured leg, one arm bracing his body, the other outstretched toward her rifle. His chest heaved, sweat and blood staining his shirt, but his eyes never left her. She handed him the weapon. Together, they pressed against the cabin wall. He loaded, aimed, and fired steady, practiced. The rifle bucked in his hands. Clara watched him work, watched pain twist his face, watched the fire in his eyes refuse to dim. This was no enemy. No myth, just a man fighting for breath, for survival. For her, gunfire surged again as settlers pushed forward. Another warrior cried out, dropping behind the fence. A horse bolted riderless. Clara reloaded, teeth gritted, and fired again. They fought side by side, two against many. Neither retreating. Eventually the tide shifted. Settlers faltered. One dropped his rifle and ran. Another cursed and pulled his wounded comrade from the fray. Tucker, bleeding from his shoulder, shouted something incoherent and disappeared into the trees, and just like that, it ended. Smoke curled through the air, hot and bitter. Dust settled. Silence fell. Clara sat in the dirt, panting. Blood oozed from her arm. Her dress was torn, face streaked with sweat and soot. The warrior slumped beside her, chest rising in shallow breaths, but alive. She looked at him. He looked back. No words passed between them. None were needed. She had crossed the line today, not by accident, not by circumstance, but by choice. With gunpowder on her hands and fire in her chest, she had claimed her place. Not with one people or the other, but with the truth that no one owned her. The warrior reached for her hand, slow, tentative. She didn't flinch. Their fingers met in blood and dust and held. The battlefield lay quiet now. Smoke drifted in low ribbons across the sunlit yard, curling through broken fences and scorched porch wood. Empty shell casings glinted in the dirt. Wind carried the sharp tang of gunpowder and blood. Tucker and his men were gone, those who could still ride. The rest had crawled or been carried away, leaving behind wounded pride and spent bullets. None had the stomach for a second round. Clara sat slumped beneath the cottonwood tree near the well, legs stretched out, her arm wrapped in a strip of her own torn petticoat. Blood seeped through the cloth, but the pain was distant now. Her chest still heaved with every breath. She had survived, but victory felt hollow. The leader approached slowly, boots crunching over cracked earth. He stood over her, casting a long shadow in the dying light. His expression was unreadable. "You fight like Comanche," he said. Clara let out a shaky laugh. "I don't know what I fight like anymore." The leader crouched, eyes sharp but not cruel. "You know what comes next?" She met his gaze. "More men, more guns." He nodded. "Your people will not forgive this." "Not soon? Not ever? I never asked for their forgiveness." The leader tilted his head. "They will call you traitor, outcast." "I've been called worse by better men." His lips twitched at the corners, almost a smile. Then he rose to full height, looking beyond her to the wood's edge where warriors waited, already preparing to move. Always ready to vanish into the land that had never betrayed them. The warrior approached from behind, limping but with increasing strength in each step. He carried her rifle slung over one shoulder. His shirt was torn, dirt and blood caking his skin, yet in his eyes was something unbroken. He knelt beside her, slow and deliberate. Then, without a word, he reached for her hand. His touch was careful. Reverent, his fingers, calloused and rough, closed around hers with gentleness that undid her. Clara swallowed hard. "No one emerges from fire untouched," he said, voice soft and low. "No one survives whole." She didn't speak. "But you lived," he continued. "And you kept me living?" They sat like that for a moment, hands clasped, heads bowed together. Not in defeat, but in understanding. The leader stepped forward again, arms crossed. "You have no home now, Clara McKee." She looked up at him, tired but calm. "Maybe I never did." He studied her for a long beat. Then his voice dropped, heavy with meaning. "Come with us." She blinked. "What?" He nodded toward the trees. "Leave this place, your people, their war. Come west. Live where law doesn't follow and blood still means something." It wasn't a threat. It wasn't pity. It was an invitation, a way out or a way forward. She looked at the warrior, who still held her hand. He didn't plead. He didn't ask. But in his eyes was something steady, true. A vow not made in words, but in being. She thought of the house behind her, splintered, burned, hollowed. Of the grave she'd already dug. Of the quiet ache in her chest that had been loneliness too long to name. She rose slowly to her feet, gripping the warrior's arm for balance. "All right," she said. "No ceremony, no conditions. Just truth." They would leave together not as prisoner and savior, not as settler and warrior, but as two people who had earned each other through fire and still stood. The morning was pale and gold. When Clara swung into the saddle one final time, the cabin stood behind her, scarred, smoke-stained, windows dark and empty. The place that had once been her entire world now looked small, hollow, like something shed and left behind. She didn't look back. Not really. Her eyes passed over the roofline, the battered porch, the tree with the rope swing long since rotted away. Then she turned her gaze forward. The warrior rode beside her, legs still bound but stronger now. His back straight, eyes on the horizon. Neither spoke, they didn't have to. The air between them was full of what had been said in gunfire and silence and the grip of a hand when the world threatened to end. The Comanche warriors moved in loose formation, slipping through low canyons and brush like wind over stone. They didn't ride fast. This wasn't retreat, it was return. Clara followed, dust rising in soft spirals from her horse's hooves. Her hands were raw from the reins, muscles sore from days of battle and sleepless nights. But there was no heaviness in her, only the clean ache of effort, of choice. The land changed as they traveled. Flat plains gave way to broken hills, then to winding trails beneath thick stands of pine and sandstone towers. The farther they rode, the quieter the world became. No more gunfire, no more accusations, just wind and hoofbeats and the occasional hawk circling far above. By dusk, they reached a narrow ravine flanked by stone and silence. Warriors dismounted, moving with the calm of men who knew they wouldn't be followed here. A fire was built, not large, just enough for warmth. The group sat in a loose ring, eating in silence. Clara remained slightly apart, watching flames dance, thoughts slow and quiet. The warrior approached after the meal, crouching beside her. He held something in his palm, a small necklace crafted of polished bone, red stone and tightly woven sinew. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. She stared at it for a moment, breath catching in her throat. It wasn't a ring, not a vow carved in stone or sealed in a church, but it meant more. It was the kind of promise forged only in survival, in blood and dust, in quiet protection, in trust earned without asking. He reached forward and tied it gently around her neck. The touch was soft, reverent. She placed her hand over the pendant, then over his hand. Their eyes met, that was all. No kiss, no fanfare, just the steady rhythm of something real. Later that night, she lay wrapped in a blanket beneath a sky full of stars so sharp they looked like ice shards. Beside her, the warrior slept on one elbow, watching the fire fade, and Clara knew she wasn't running anymore. Not from her grief, not from her past, not from the faces who would call her traitor. She had chosen this, chosen him. They hadn't survived to return to what was. They had survived to build what could be, out here in the silence between stars. In the wild where names no longer mattered, that was enough. More than enough. It was love, and it needed no permission. Out here, survival is earned. Love isn't promised, and peace is a choice made one step at a time. Clara didn't ride back to the world that betrayed her. She rode forward toward a future that didn't care where she came from, only who she chose to become, and the warrior didn't need to speak his love. He showed it in silence, in loyalty, in firelight and bone. If this story stirred something within you, if you believe love can rise even from dust and danger, then you found the right place. Subscribe to Wild West Echoes for more tales of forbidden glances, fierce hearts, and the kind of romance that doesn't ask for permission. Don't forget to hit the bell so you never miss a story where bullets miss but hearts don. Single quotes to Wild West Echoes, where love is wild and worth every risk.